I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Oh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hi, listeners. I'm so excited to have Craig here. We are excited to have him for many reasons, which we'll get into on the show. And thanks to our listeners on Digital Distraction and Mental Health News Radio. Craig, welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Absolutely. So I am blown away by what you're doing. I've looked at the whole website, and we'll get into what it is. But first out of the gate, why are you doing this? And what are you doing?
Okay. So what we're doing, we are the Digital Mental Health Project. We are a consultancy. I and my wife run it. And what we do is we develop educational programs and research that have an intention of better enabling a responsible use of digital technology to support people's stress and mental health.
Mm.
And so this project came about as the result of my bringing together two parts of my life. One part of it is my occupational role as a digital health strategist in the healthcare industry for a number of years. And the other part is my vocational role as a mental health educator and advocate, where I've worked with NAMI for a number of years, coaching and educating caregivers of loved ones who are mentally ill. And so we're very gratified about this work because we believe that digital technology, when used skillfully, has a role to play in improving our health, where unfortunately, through unskillful use right now, too many of us are using it to damage our health.
Right. So you're covering a lot of things with what you're doing, not just social media, gaming, the use part of digital technology. You're covering a wider perspective than just that, but you're also covering that, I would imagine.
Yeah. Because the fact is that we see research, startups and applications in all of those different areas of technology that are actually figuring out how to use the technology in a way that, again, supports health. And on our website, we blog about and write about these examples so that listeners can get more information about this. And we'll talk about that, later in the discussion.
Okay, wonderful. Well, when did you start this digital mental health project?
Yeah, so this all got started back in 2014 when I was on a sabbatical between two jobs and thinking about a research project that I could engage myself in. And it was, while sitting in my desk, it was as though the universe poured the idea into the top of my head. I was just thinking about how do I take my expertise and apply it in a way that can do some good that is personally meaningful for me. And so I often tell people that this work that we're doing is actually we serving ourselves. I and my wife and my family more largely have had a tragedy related to mental illness within our family. which has put us in a caregiver role.
Mm-hmm.
And thus, we remember the angst and the stress and the confusion, the anger and the fear that was associated with that situation. And so in the development of our programs and our research, it really is about we serving ourselves,
Right.
where the burden of illness and the situations of caregiving of those that are either burning out from stress or who are succumbing to mental illness because of distress or disorder or disability is only growing all the time. The World Health Organization, has reported that depression is now among the top causes of disability on the entire planet. And we know that any of us have a 1 in 5 chance of becoming mentally disordered or disabled at any point in our lives.
Right.
And so this is an important matter that we feel inspired and motivated to do what we can with what we have to help.
I'm looking at your website and you have an about page. Is that your wife, Cheryl,
Yeah.
I see?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's my heart. We've been married over 30 years.
Oh, good
Yes,
for
my
you.
heart.
We'll talk a little bit about your backgrounds as they relate to, the mental health field.
Yeah. So I have worked in healthcare, and I'm a marketer by training, and so as a function of my work, I've had the occasion of marketing in the area of mental health before the incident in my family, and so that exposure had challenged me, along with certain colleagues of mine, around the effects of mental illness in my particular home community. So I'll just let you know that I'm an African American male,
Mhm.
and the African American community suffers from an above index toll when it comes to mental illness for various reasons related to poverty, racism, so forth and so on, and that's another discussion. But it got me thinking about this topic in my own community, but not much. And then when the circumstances of mental illness came directly to our doorstep, that then pulled us into the advocacy and the volunteer and the education work that we've done with the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And in doing that work, my wife and I had merely been leveraging what we are naturally gifted in and do occupationally, me marketing and education and she education. And in that work, as I said earlier, we focused on caregivers because often as a caregiver, you're not able to do as much for your loved one as you would like because they're not going to be proactive about their mental health until they reach a level of personal readiness. Meanwhile, though, you have to be or should be proactive about self-care so that you don't burn out, so that you don't actually become the secondary ill.
Right.
And you're then able to help your loved one when they're ready and need you to actually help them to do something for themselves. And so it was in this work that we had been pulled into this area of mental health. And I should say, additionally, a lot of our work involved taking mental health education to communities of faith. Because one of the things that we found is when confronted with this, we could not find help within our family, and we could not find help within our congregation, the Black church, where we have been members for pretty much our entire lives. It's not that they didn't want to help, it's that they had not been equipped to help. And so a lot of our programming, we took to communities of faith, and not just where they're pastors, but mosques, where they're imams, rabbis, and synagogues, priests.
Fantastic.
We really feel that communities of faith play a critical role in most people's coping with their mental and emotional health, and there's a need for these congregations or part of the ecosystem to be equipped for that. And then it was later that the dot got connected for us around a gap in the educational market as we see it,
Yeah.
in people understanding how the technologies could help them. Keeping in mind that there are 4 or 5 general classes of technologies that we see being applied to mental health. So we have teletherapy,
Right.
which you hear more and more about. You even see the ads on television and the internet now.
Right.
Then
I
there
just
are,
did 2 interviews. My very first interview 8 years ago was about telemental health. And at that time,
yes,
people were like, we're not going to ever do that. That's going nowhere. And I was like, you're going to be wrong.
oh yeah, it's definitely going somewhere now because enough evidence has been developed around it that the government is actually reimbursing for it.
Yes.
And it's really helping with access to mental health services, and especially in rural communities where it's very difficult to get a therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist, right? So that's one category. The other category is therapeutic mobile apps, which largely are delivering cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
which is one of the most highly evidence-based interventions,
Right.
particularly for depression and anxiety, and to some degree, phobias. And we're now even seeing productive uses of cognitive behavioral therapy in schizophrenia and psychosis.
Mm.
The other category is wearables, which track our biometrics and help us to understand where we're becoming stressed or unsettled so that we can calm ourselves down and get ourselves back in balance. And then you have virtual reality, where there's a lot of use of virtual reality. The VA has been a real innovator, the Veterans Administration, in the use of virtual reality for post-traumatic stress disorder with veterans. We also see applications on the stress and wellness side when it comes to meditation and relaxation and
Right.
pain management. And there are even some emergent applications with schizophrenia and psychosis when it comes to virtual reality. And so,
And
even
also
though there
autism.
are,
I mean, I went to an
and
entire
autism, yes,
conference.
you're correct.
Yeah, I wore the
You're correct.
glasses, I did the thing, and their game, the couple of games that they had, and we were
Yes.
presenting at this ABA conference. So it's quite amazing what's happening in the space.
Yeah, yeah. But here's the thing. So even though there is a pretty significant set of offerings in the market, we see when you look at the adoption, so when you look at awareness and adoption and utilization of these technologies, is still pretty low.
Right.
Now, that's not unusual because this is a young market and there's always an adoption curve that you go through with these things, right? But whatever we can do to accelerate awareness and understanding of what the options are as it relates to one's digital lifestyle, and then an understanding of how to properly utilize these tools, again, fitting one's digital lifestyle and mental health situation, it's going to have a positive impact on us, whether I'm stressed out and susceptible to burnout and I need to avoid burnout, or whether I'm diagnosed and I need to move on to recovery. And keep in mind that, like with any technology, it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
So I'm exuberant about the benefit of these technologies, but we also need to understand the risks. So the fact is that we need to make sure that when we work with these technologies, that they've got proper privacy policy so that our data is not abused. And unfortunately, the majority of these applications do not meet proper standard when it comes to that, right?
Right.
The
Yes.
other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that the technologies are properly usable. And then the third thing I would say that we need to do is we need to make sure that the therapeutic interventions that are being delivered by these technologies are actually evidence-based.
Yes, and
Right.
it's fascinating to me how many advances we see and how I can run my 3 companies 100% on my phone, which is
Yeah.
phenomenal. And yet this device that I carry around is also the cause of a whole lot of other issues like physical problems with my neck, my arm, my hands, my
Yes.
back,
Yes.
because that regulatory control, or because we just didn't know what we didn't know when smartphones came out,
Yeah.
and how much we'd get sucked
Yep.
in, and what a dopamine hit, we would get from using these
Right.
devices. All of what I'm saying, but I
Yeah.
see exactly what you're saying. There needs to be
Yeah.
this coalescence between, if I just think I made up a word, coalesce doesn't, it probably not coalescence, but
Yes.
anyway, my listeners will laugh because I like to mash words together. But anyway, there hasn't been that bridge, which it sounds like that's what you
Right.
are, between here's the good and here's what we need to work on. Let's move them together.
That is right. That is right. Yeah. And it is a normal phenomenon that when a new technology emerges in human society, that our initial use of it hurts us. It's usually
Right.
later, after we come to a realization of the damage it does to us. I mean, you go
Yes.
back to the Industrial Revolution, right, and see the same sort of thing, that we then start to pay attention to safety, things like safety and
Yes.
ergonomics, and not overusing it, and having to regulate and we call it being more skillful. So we believe that technology is like a hammer. It's just a tool. You
Right.
can use it to build a house, or you can use it to bash someone's head in. We need to have the
Very
right
true.
level of skill and intention in how we use the technology, so that once again, we become more healthy because of it, not less healthy.
Oh, I love it. I love the fact that you have a positive message about this and positive intention. We've
Yeah.
done so much research into this with my network and the colleagues that I work with. And, a few places kind of seemed like maybe they were going on an interesting track, but there was always this negative undertone underneath. And I
Yeah.
don't like to put my energy into that kind of, that, because I'm a techie. I mean, I'm not going
Yeah.
to, yeah, there are things that we need to do to make it better in a many, many ways, but I'm never going to be a hater about things like social media or, um, you know,
Yeah.
virtual reality or anything like that, because I see the other side of how incredible it is.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. And I should say that. So I'm a gadget person, and I'm a techie also. And so I've had a number of positive, like direct positive experience with the management of my own mental wellness
Ah,
using mental health chatbots, for example,
nice.
or using wearables that vibrate to let me know that I've stopped breathing because I'm overwhelmed, and then I remember to take a
Mm,
breath, or
yeah.
using brainwave readers during my meditation and relaxation sessions that give me direct audio feedback that's improved my ability to concentrate. And so my positive experiences with some of these technologies is what connected the dot for me that more people need to know and understand how this can work for them. Thus, our development of what we call the Stress Tech Literacy Series, which is
Mm,
about wellness. And then we're also working on a mental tech literacy series. The distinction being that stress tech is about um, you're just stressed out, you're not diagnosed, and you need to avoid burnout. Mental tech, which is more about what happens in the clinic, is about you're diagnosed,
right.
and now you need to move from illness to recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm. I love this. If any of you heard something pop up, I was looking around the site, and because we're techies, so we have to do 12 things at once, if not more. But it popped open your mental tech wearables landscape and applications that you have up on YouTube, and
Yeah.
I watched it before, and it's fantastic. And again, I just want to reiterate, and I could hear it in the way that you're speaking. Everything, the way your brain is wired, I can already tell, especially with me interviewing all of these neuroscientists, your brain is wired towards positivity. And that is fantastic,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you what we learned. All of our my wonderful colleagues that are part of the network, and also another project we're working on related to digital technology, we what we notice when we get invited to go speak in schools, and we're talking to high school students, we're talking to middle school students and so on, and there is just no way that you are going to make a dent in what we're doing if you in any way shame people or have any negative connotation towards what we're talking about, because these kids came out of the womb with an iPad and a smartphone. So they just look at you like does not compute, and I understand why. So that's where I think the
Genie's out of the
market
bottle.
it's like the market has gone wrong in that we've tried to make this a bad thing and a bad thing. And yes, is there an addiction side to it? Absolutely. But we can't go at it from this, this addiction heavy place. We've got to go at it with, this is a positive. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole bunch of people with a wall saying, nope, not going to listen to you.
Yeah, that's true. So if you'll allow, I'd like to cite a couple of examples of what we think of as embedded digital mental health. And I actually wrote a blog post about this. It's on my site, but it's really interesting. So, you have all these mental health apps and, the things I described, right?
Right.
The fact is, though, that most people are not going to leave their normal stream of digital engagement, their digital lifestyle, as we call it, right, in order to go off and work with something that is not a part of what they normally do. So I was reading an article the other month about how the NHS in the UK, when looking at the population of young people that play Fortnite. You familiar with Fortnite?
Oh, yes. I have a 30-year-old.
Popular online game.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what it is that there's a proposal, and I need to go and check on if they've implemented this or not, that if you can't get the players of Fortnite to leave Fortnite to go and engage in a mental wellness intervention, embed the interventions in the Fortnite game. And so, you can set up the sensors and algorithms that will show that there's a young person that's been playing Fortnite for 8 straight hours.
Mm.
And you can have characters or signposts or pop-ups that actually talk to them about the value of taking a break, or
like as simple as them. Yeah, and I'm sorry, but like as simple as when I drive my car and I have a newer vehicle, and every 3 hours on a road trip it says, hey, maybe you should stop and get some coffee. So that's what we're talking about.
Exactly, right? And so this is not just about getting people to download an app. Sometimes it's about going to where people are actually engaging in an addictive behavior and executing the intervention in that particular context. There was another case I'd read about in a banking app, right? So, one of the unfortunate circumstances that often will happen, I shouldn't say often, that can happen when a person is in a manic episode as a part of bipolar, is that they go on spending spree.
Right.
Well, what can pick up a spending spree faster than your banking app or your credit card? And so the idea of having a sensor in your banking app or your credit card that when you start to go on a spending spree will send a notice to a loved one who can arrest that behavior before it becomes, dozens of thousands of dollars versus, let's say, just $1,000, until that person comes through that manic episode. These are the kinds of applications, right, that if we can get them built into our everyday digital experiences, can actually avoid some degree of damage.
Yes.
And more companies are being encouraged to think about how you use the technology to actually protect people versus not doing it and then being accused of participating in people being abused.
Right, exactly. Creating it to cause addiction, which we know that's been done, unfortunately, in
Oh, yes,
some
yes.
some cases. But yes, having those safety markers that pop up within. I know. I think, of course, having retreats where everybody unplugs and get back to nature and so on. That's all fantastic and important, and we need to do those things too. But I
I
was
agree.
hearing so much about you've got to do that. And I thought that is just not going to, if that's, again, that comes from a shaming space, meaning you're doing something that's harmful and wrong for you. So you need to go to this retreat. And the reality is, should you go to the retreat? Well, yeah, you should. But the message for why has been just off. And
Yes,
what you're talking
that's
about,
right.
that, okay, let's put it right where it already is. So you don't have to leave.
Yeah,
There's no shame. There's just safety measures and wellness wrapped into what you're already doing. Brilliant.
absolutely, absolutely. Can I mention, because it comes to mind, another aspect where there's value in these technologies when it comes to stigma and shame?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Yeah, so we all know that for better and sometimes for worse, digital technologies give us a degree of anonymity. I can go to a chat bot or a website, and no one will know that it's me. Well, for people who are in communities or societies where there's a high degree of stigma and shame around investigating or getting assessed or even engaging in therapy as it
Right.
relates to their mental wellness, the fact is that digital platforms can allow people to stay anonymous while getting the help that they
Yes.
need.
Yes.
And this is a particular application of digital mental health technology that has great potential. And
Yeah.
again, in situations where if a person has to expose themselves, they will never get help.
Oh,
But if you give them a
absolutely.
means to get educated, assessed, and therapy without anyone knowing about it, then potentially all the better for that person. And
This
I know there,
is
there are naysayers out there who talk about the ethics of that, but I believe
mm,
that we're savvy enough as a society that we can figure that out if we work at it long enough and well enough.
absolutely. I mean, this is one of the reasons we started the first responder mental health network, because first responders,
Mm.
first of all, they are the first people that show up when you have any kind of an issue, including a mental health crisis, that where
Yeah,
you need to call a first responder. And they go through even more than we can imagine. They go through
yeah,
their own mental health crises, and there are the last people to go get help. But
yes,
if they know that they can go to a safe, like, everything you just said, they'll do it. And guess what,
yes,
listeners, we need the people that are first to respond to all of our problems as a society. We know we need those people to be as mentally healthy as
yep.
and supported as possible, so that we can get the help we need.
That's right. When the helpers can't help, then we're in a
Yeah,
real jam, aren't we? Yeah, you're correct.
exactly.
You're correct.
Exactly.
You're correct.
Mm. Oh, I'm so excited about everything. I'm like, why haven't I heard of him before? And you didn't know anything about me or my network. And so what? The universe
Yeah,
brings
it's
things
such a
together when
blessing.
it does.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
And I think
indeed.
sometimes you need to
Very much.
have contrast. Sometimes I'll have a not, a really interesting and painful or challenging experience. And I always think, well, what's the popcorn moment going to be out of this? Because I always have the
Yeah,
opposite of it, where I go, oh, I was supposed to appreciate more when
yeah,
the thing I need to focus on comes in. So I'm having a bit of
yeah.
that moment too here, which is phenomenal. So
Okay.
we'll do other shows, obviously, because there's a lot to unpack. But let me ask you this:
Yes.
how has the psychological profession and the educational profession, how welcome have they been to you and what you talk about?
Um, so I'm going to say cautious, very
Okay,
cautious. And when I say
understandable.
that, I'm not saying it to criticize. I
Hmm.
mean, the fact is, as one who's worked in healthcare for many years, healthcare should move more slowly and be more
Right.
cautious because we're talking about life and death and various other types of liability, right? But that being as it is, what doctors will say when I talk to them is either I don't know about that or I don't understand what the safety or ethical ramifications of that are. And
Right.
until I do, I'm not going to bother with it.
Right.
Or I don't believe that there's evidence, medical
Yeah.
scientific evidence that supports that, right? So
Right.
it's not so much a rejection as I see it as it is in the rush of things that they've been trained in and learned. This is now a new area that with education there will be a development of confidence, and with confidence, there will be a better use of it. And we can see this if we look over the last 30 years with lots of things, drug therapies and medical devices of various types that doctors used to say, I don't want to use that. And now they don't think twice about it. And so, when I think about the next 20, 30 years of my life, and I'll tell you, I think particularly about my grandson and the kind of world that I want him to have when it comes to mental health interventions when he goes to university and what's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
be 15 years from now, right? That further motivates me in this work because we want 15 years from now for people to have understood enough about this use of the technology that they don't think twice about it, right? You know,
Yeah.
based on your digital lifestyle,
Yep.
that there's teletherapy, there's an app, there's a
Yep.
wearable, there's something that works on your smartwatch that you use to keep yourself um, safe and healthy in your
Right.
mind and emotions and psyche the way you do with your body. And
Absolutely.
that's
And
what we're working on.
yeah, and as much as, yeah, this phone that allows me to run, several organizations from it. And yes, I have some physical issues because of the number of years that I've been
Yeah,
using it. But on the other hand, it also has allowed me to not sit at a desk. It's allowed me to
yeah,
travel all over the world and be able to work. It's allowed me
mm,
to have this freedom.
yeah,
So there's always that positive side to what we're talking about. And I can't stress how important it is to look at it that way. Otherwise, nobody under 25 is going to listen to a word you say about
yeah. That's the truth. That is the truth. Yeah,
it.
absolutely. I agree.
Well, 2014, you started this project. That's a long time. How have you kept
Yeah.
yourself from going? It's from just keep plugging along to, just to keep going and keep
Yeah.
going when you know that healthcare can move at a snail's pace. How did you keep yourself just the tortoise in the hare, keep going?
Well, yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's principally two things, maybe three actually, but I'll just mention two. So one is I've got proper expectations.
Mm,
So because I have worked in healthcare and know how slow things move, I don't frustrate myself with how slow things move.
right. Right,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, I set my expectation to appreciate that it's good that doctors and consumers are cautious, and particularly about a topic that unfortunately carries so much stigma and shame. And so don't expect this to happen in 2 years or 5 years. Expect this to happen in a decade or two. When you have that expectation, then you're not frustrated.
Right.
Only a sprinter is frustrated when they're running a marathon, not a marathoner, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then the second thing I would tell you is I'm motivated by the need to relieve the suffering
Mm,
of those that are in the situation that I have and am in. Really.
phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell our listeners where they can find out more about what you're doing.
Yes. So we have our website, the Digital Mental Health Project.com.
And the
Sorry
the
that it's
is
so
in
long.
is the in front of it, or is it just digital mental?
Yeah, no, the. So
Okay.
just digitalmentalhealthproject.com.
Awesome.
That's where you'll be able to find our blog. You'll find information about our Stress Tech webinars. And you can subscribe to our newsletter so that as we develop new programs, you'll be made aware of that. We also have a digital stress management survey where we're working to get a better understanding of the level of awareness and use of these different types of technology in different care situations. And so, yeah, that's where you can find information about us. And one of the things I'd like to offer for your show notes is I can send over some information about our resource and some other ones in this area that we think would be helpful that you can offer to your listeners.
We'll send that out on social media as well. So fantastic.
Very good.
Craig, I am so glad you came across my radar. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, this is a real blessing, and thank you for the work that you're doing also.
Oh, absolutely. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Digital Distraction and Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can find it, but I'm opposing.
Good boy.